Grand Central Station. Elijah's chance at a new life is slipping away with the last train. Then, an old man gasps for breath, collapsing onto a bench. People look, then walk away. Elijah doesn't, he stays. And that single choice will unlock a story stranger than fiction. Elijah Carter, a young man in his late 20s, wove through the chaos of Grand Central Station with his satchel pressed to his side. The grand clock overhead ticked away mercilessly, each second another nail in the coffin of his opportunity. This wasn't just a job interview. It was the job interview, the one that could rescue his family from scraping by and finally put years of rejection behind him. Announcements blared through speakers. Trains rumbled beneath vaulted ceilings. The smell of roasted coffee and damp concrete filled the air. Elijah's heart pounded in rhythm with the departure board blinking final call. Then he saw him, an elderly man, gray suit rumpled, cane slipping from his hand, crumpled onto a wooden bench. His face contorted in pain, chest heaving, lips struggling for air. Passers-by glanced, slowed, and then moved on, their eyes sliding away as though he were invisible. Elijah's breath caught. His train doors would close in less than 30 seconds. His future dangled in front of him. But the man's eyes, tired, desperate, pleading, locked onto his. "Please, help me," the old man whispered, voice trembling. Elijah's body moved before his mind caught up. He dropped his satchel, rushed to the man's side, and steadied him against the bench. "Stay with me. I've got you." His fingers dialed 911, his other hand gripping the man's shoulder. Around them, footsteps pounded the floor, but the world felt narrowed to just two people. The whistle of the train pierced the air. Elijah looked up, doors sliding shut, his chance vanishing in a blink. But in that instant, it didn't matter. Elijah knelt beside the man, steadying his breathing. Speaking words of reassurance, he barely believed himself. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. His interview, his dream, was gone. But he didn't yet realize he had just stepped onto a far greater journey than any train could have taken him. Before we move to the next part of Elijah's story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Drop your country and time in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story so far, please consider subscribing. It really helps us share more powerful stories with you. The blare of ambulance sirens faded as the vehicle pulled into the hospital bay. Elijah sat in the back beside the old man, clutching the railing as the paramedics wheeled him out. His pulse still raced, his shirt damp with sweat. The image of the train leaving the station replayed again and again in his head, a bitter reminder of what he'd lost. Hours passed in a blur of white walls, antiseptic smells and muffled footsteps echoing through the hospital corridors. Elijah sat slumped in a plastic chair outside the emergency ward, his satchel lying useless at his feet. All he could think about was the interview, the opportunity he had been preparing for weeks, gone in an instant. A nurse approached him. "He's stable now. You can see him?" Relief washed over Elijah, though it was quickly drowned by exhaustion. He stood, rubbed his eyes, and followed her into a small recovery room. The old man lay in bed, pale but alive. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, but his eyes lit up the moment they found Elijah. He reached out a trembling hand. "You," the man whispered, voice weak but steady. "You stayed?" Elijah stepped closer, clasping the frail hand gently. "Of course I did. You needed help." The old man's lips curved into a thin smile. "Most people just walked by." "You stopped!" "You saved me." Elijah shrugged, looking away. "I just did what anyone should have done." But inside, guilt churned. He had lost something irreplaceable. His future had slipped through his fingers. And what did he have to show for it? A stranger's gratitude. The old man studied him for a long moment, then spoke again. "You're troubled. Tell me, what did you lose today?" Elijah hesitated. He wasn't in the habit of spilling his soul to strangers. But something in the man's eyes, the sincerity, the quiet insistence, unlocked him. "I was on my way to a job interview," Elijah admitted. "Not just any job, the one that could finally get my family out of this mess we've been in. My mother's widowed, my sister's still in school. I've been picking up whatever work I can. delivery shifts, temp jobs, while chasing this dream of writing. It hasn't worked out yet, and now, I think I've just blown my last shot. Silence lingered in the room, broken only by the soft beeping of the heart monitor. The old man's expression softened. Writing, you say? That explains the way you speak. Words matter to you. Elijah gave a small laugh, bitter at the edges. They used to. Lately, they just feel like a luxury I can't afford. The old man shook his head slowly. Don't underestimate the power of words. They outlive us. They shape lives long after we're gone. He squeezed Elijah's hand with surprising strength. Maybe you didn't miss your train, son. Maybe you caught the right one. Elijah blinked, startled by the words. A lump rose in his throat, but he pushed it down. He wanted to believe them, but the sting of missed opportunity was still too fresh. The man smiled faintly. I'm Harold Whitmore, retired professor. Literature was my life's work. Now it seems fate has given me another student, at least for a little while. Elijah, he replied quietly. Well, Elijah, Harold said, I'd like to keep in touch. Something tells me this isn't the end of our story. Before Elijah could answer, a nurse entered to check Harold's vitals. Harold let go of his hand but held his gaze. Leave me your number before you go, please. Elijah hesitated, then nodded. He scribbled his number on a notepad by the bed. As he walked back into the sterile hallway, his mind churned. He didn't know what this connection meant, or whether it could ever replace what he had lost. All he knew was that he had chosen compassion over ambition, and somehow, that choice had tied his fate to a stranger named Harold Whitmore, and for reasons Elijah couldn't explain, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just shifted course. 3 weeks passed. Elijah had nearly convinced himself that Harold Whitmore was just a passing figure in his life, a strange twist of fate that had cost him one dream but left him with a stranger's gratitude. Then one rainy afternoon his phone rang. Mr. Carter. Harold's warm voice greeted him, tinged with frailty but also energy. I was wondering if you'd do me the honor of joining me for dinner at my home. Nothing formal. Just good food and conversation. Elijah hesitated. Part of him feared being a burden, another part worried about getting his hopes up. But something in Harold's voice, gentle, insistent, nudged him to accept. That Friday evening, Elijah found himself standing before a grand old townhouse tucked between modern apartment blocks. Its brick walls were weathered with age, ivy clinging stubbornly to the facade. Inside, the air smelled of roasted herbs, garlic, and freshly baked bread. Warm lamplight spilled across shelves lined with books, the kind whose cracked spines told of decades of love. Paintings adorned the walls, landscapes, portraits, a whole gallery of stories frozen in color. Harold greeted him with a handshake and led him into the dining room, where the table was set for 3. Elijah, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Clara. Clara Whitmore was in her early 30s, sharp-eyed yet warm, with a quiet presence that drew attention without demanding it. Over dinner, roast chicken, vegetables, and Harold's favorite wine, conversation flowed. Clara asked Elijah about his background, his dreams, his struggles. At first, he spoke hesitantly, embarrassed by how small his achievements seemed. But soon, words poured out of him, the late-night scribbling stories that no one read, the rejection letters, the stubborn belief that stories could still change people. Clara listened with an intensity that surprised him. When he finished, she leaned forward. I'm working on a new documentary project, she said. It's about unsung heroes, ordinary people who make extraordinary choices. I think your perspective and your writing could help shape it. Elijah blinked, startled. Me? I'm not sure I'm qualified for something like that. Clara smiled. You're more qualified than you think. Just try. For now, it's only research. Reluctantly, Elijah agreed. He told himself it was temporary, a favor, nothing more. But as days turned into weeks, meetings became late-night brainstorming sessions, and their working partnership deepened. Clara saw something in his words that no one else ever had. For the first time in years, Elijah felt it. His passion was no longer invisible. Someone had noticed. The weeks stretched into months, and Elijah's life began to shift in ways he hadn't expected. Days that once felt empty were now filled with research, interviews, and late-night writing sessions. Clara challenged him constantly, pushing him to refine his words, to cut deeper into the truth of the stories they uncovered. "Elijah," she often said, tapping a line in his draft, "don't just tell me what happened. Show me why it mattered. Show me the heart." Her belief in him was steady, almost unnerving. She treated his words not as charity, but as necessary. Yet no matter how much praise she gave, doubt stalked Elijah like a shadow. Every time he sat at the keyboard, a voice whispered in his mind, "You're only here because Harold nearly died. Without that, you'd still be invisible." The weight of that thought pressed heavier as Clara's production team grew involved. Meetings filled Harold's living room, cluttered with cameras, sound equipment, and clipboards. Elijah sat at the table, surrounded by professionals who seemed sharper, faster, more confident. One evening, during a heated discussion, the storm broke. "Elijah, the narrative flow feels off," one producer remarked. "This section, too sentimental. We need tighter pacing," another chimed in. "Honestly, I'm not sure his writing style fits our vision. It's too literary." Their words struck Elijah like stones. He tried to defend himself. "The heart is what makes these stories real. Without it, they're just facts." But the dismissive glances, the quick interruptions, made his chest burn. Clara tried to mediate, but by then, Elijah's frustration had reached its peak. "You know what?" he snapped, standing abruptly. "I get it. I don't belong here. I'm just the guy who stumbled in because I happened to help your father. You don't need me." "None of you do." The room fell silent. Elijah grabbed his satchel and stormed out, the echo of his footsteps pounding against the polished wood floor like a drumbeat of failure. Outside, the night was cool, the city alive with distant sirens and glowing lights. But Elijah felt only the weight of humiliation pressing him down. He leaned against a lamppost, head in his hands, every insecurity roaring louder than ever. Moments later, footsteps approached. Clara. She didn't speak at first. She just stood beside him, letting the silence stretch. Finally, she said softly, "Elijah, do you really think that's why you're here?" "Out of pity?" He didn't answer, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the ground. Clara stepped closer. "You think you missed your train. But Elijah, you've been on the right track all along. You just never believed it." Her words cut through him, raw and sharp. For a long moment he stood frozen. Then, slowly, the fight drained from his chest. Maybe, just maybe, she was right. Maybe all the rejection, all the doubt, had led him not to a dead end, but to this. It was the turning point he hadn't seen coming. For the first time, Elijah began to believe, not just in Clara's faith in him, but in himself. Months later, the city buzzed with anticipation. Posters lined theater walls, trailers streamed across screens, and the title of Clara's new documentary was on everyone's lips. But behind the scenes, in a quiet corner of the premiere hall, Elijah sat with his heart hammering like a drum. When the lights dimmed, silence swept the crowd. The film began, a soft voice, his own, filled the room. Elijah's words, carefully chosen, poured across the screen, carrying the weight of real lives and hidden struggles. His narration wove through images of resilience, sacrifice, and quiet heroism. Stories of people who might otherwise have been forgotten now pulsed with life. He watched, stunned, as the audience leaned forward, drawn in by his sentences, his rhythm, his heart. For the first time, Elijah saw his words not as scribbles in a notebook, but as something powerful enough to move strangers to tears. When the credits rolled, a hush lingered, then applause thundered through the hall. The sound rose, wave upon wave, until it felt like the building itself might lift off the ground. On the screen, among the final names, appeared the words Elijah's breath caught. There it was. Proof. Not a favor, not charity. His name, his work, his story, standing on its own. Harold Whitmore sat proudly in the front row, healthier and stronger now, his eyes glistening. The retired professor clapped with quiet dignity, looking at the young man who had once pulled him back from the edge of death. A smile of gratitude and of faith lit his face. Beside Elijah, Clara reached for his hand. Her grip was firm, warm, steady. She didn't need to say a word. The pride in her eyes told him everything. Offers would come, Elijah knew, requests to write, to speak, to create. But beyond all the glittering doors that were opening, he understood something deeper. He hadn't just gained recognition. He had found purpose. His words could shine light into forgotten corners, give strength to the overlooked, awaken hope in those who had stopped believing. And as the applause swelled again, Elijah's thoughts drifted back to that crowded station months ago, the rumble of a departing train, the trembling breath of a stranger on the platform, his own decision to stop when others kept walking. He realized, with clarity sharper than ever before, missing that train hadn't ruined his life. It had given him a new one. For the first time in years, Elijah didn't feel like a man chasing after a chance. He felt like a man who had finally arrived. If you've ever felt like you missed your train, remember Elijah's story. Sometimes the detours lead to the destination you were meant to find. Share this with someone who needs that reminder today.